Good generic time of the day, as they say in the podcasting world. If you've ever listened to the IT Provider Network, and I thank you so much if you have, you know that I'm a big fan of coaches, outside coaches. I started using them when we started our MSP because, frankly, I didn't know anything about the industry. So over the years, I've used several coaches, mostly pertaining to the industry that we're in. But recently, I've started to work with coaches that are outside of the industry. And from those coaches, I've learned a few techniques that I want to share with you today to really help you build a world-class team.
Welcome to the IT Provider Network. Are you a managed service entrepreneur wanting to take your business to the next level? Do you excel in IT, but feel your business management could be better? Join Terry Rossi, where every episode he shares the skills, tips, and tricks that helped him to build a successful worldwide business.
Before I get going with this episode, I want to tell you about a special deal you can get from one of those coaches and an investment I think you should make in yourself. About 6 months ago, I joined a group called Owner Insiders, and it's a group put together by Chris Brogan and Rob Hatch. You've probably heard me speak about Chris Brogan before. He was the gentleman behind the 3 Words challenge that I did at the beginning of the year. He's also a best-selling author. He wrote many books. The one that you might know is called Trust Agents. It's a New York Times bestseller on using the web to build a reputation and trust within your customers. Chris and Rob have developed this mastermind group that's just awesome, in my opinion. It brings a lot of new content to me that's not content I get from my normal channels. So the group's called Owner Insiders. It consists of a couple webinars a month, as well as a really well-used Slack group. So they're very popular with their Slack group. You get access to that. You get access to all their training courses, their webinars. There's about 30 of them up there, and they're ranging in topics from everything from branding to putting on a webinar, to building a podcast, to writing a book, to increasing your customer satisfaction. Really a full gamut of kind of soft skills that we need to run our business. So why am I telling you this? Well, I'm telling you this because I just got a notice that I'm grandfathered in for the price that I'm in, and that's $100 a month. And then it's going to $179 in the next few weeks. So if you're listening to this message now, go to the show notes at the itprovidernetwork.com/28 and get the link to Chris Brogan's site. If you use that link and you do it before the end of January, I think you should be able to sign up for the $100 a month. I wholly recommend it. I'll be in there. You'll see me in the Slack group along with hundreds of other people. And Chris and Rob are very approachable. You can write to them and they'll write you right back. So I highly recommend it. Again, back to our episode. Here we are almost 2 months into the new year and 2/3 through the first quarter. Time really flies when you're having fun, but it also crawls when you're not. I don't know about you, but dealing with personnel issues is when it really stands still for me. I despise them. I can't comment on your business, but sometimes in mine, it seems like I have the land of the misfit toys. If I'm being honest, we have some really great people, but we also have some less than great people too. Over the years, I haven't always been the best at hiring, and sometimes my hiring choices were based on an immediate need. They were based on pain that I was experiencing, not really a well-thought-out process or a well-thought-out interview process. You know the time in your business when your only engineer quits, you're forced to do all the work. It's the guy you hire then that's those kind of hires that I'm talking about. I've definitely been there and done that. But I digress. I've grown since then, and thankfully I've built resilience into my team, into my processes, into my documentation, so that our company is not so reliant on one person. But that wasn't always the case. Even though this episode is not about hiring, I want to tell you that when you do hire, you need to be as objective as possible. You need to think carefully about your hires. You're going to be living with them for quite a long time. So think about it, slow down, get some resources. If you go back to the earlier episodes of the IT Provider Network, I did 3 particular episodes on hiring. Go back and listen to them. Also pick up the hiring guidebook that I've created. You can get that on the itprovidernetwork.com under the resources section. So I have a new thought for 2018, and I think I've shared it with you. It's becoming my mantra this year, helping me achieve my goals. And it's what separates us from our competition is not really our team, but the way we communicate with our clients. And what I mean by that is every company in the world brags that they have the best people or the best team. And most of them really believe that they do. But the problem is we all can't have the best people. It's just not possible. So what do we do instead? We need to work to improve our teams, and we need to communicate better with our customers to let them know what is going on in our company that could help them. So what can you do to continually improve your team and leverage your most expensive resource in your company? What can you do to continually raise the bar of the performance of your company? What can you do to achieve world domination? Well, in the next 2 episodes of the IT Provider Network, I'm going to present to you 2 techniques that we've implemented in our company that have made a huge change in our team base. In this episode, I'm going to talk about ABC ranking, and you might have heard of that before. You also might have a misconception about it. And in episode 29, I'm going to tell you about ESPs, or employee success plans, that we use. I think these 2 methods together go a long way to build world-class teams. So let's first talk about ABC ranking. ABC ranking is the process of ranking your team players into A players, B players, and C players. It's a highly controversial method, mostly because of what's referred to as forced ranking or stack ranking. The difference between ABC ranking and forced ranking is that in forced ranking, everyone must fit into just one place on the bell curve. So the top 20% are the A players, the middle 70% make up the B players, and finally the bottom 10% make up the C players. So in this model, each year the bottom 10% usually gets the axe. It was made famous by Jack Welch of GE back in the 80s. He implemented forced ranking in GE, and every year the bottom 10% got whacked off, with the idea being we'd get more Bs and Cs into the company. Right now, GE's not doing so hot, so we'll see what happens. There were some problems with forced ranking. Maybe someone in the bottom 10% could easily have been coached up into the middle 70%. Replacing your bottom 10% can also be pretty costly. It costs money to keep turning people in and out of your company. And finally, forced ranking causes some really weird tension in a company. Nobody wants to be in the bottom 10%, so there can be some tattletaling, some infighting, some sabotage even, so that you don't end up in the bottom 10%. So that's why we don't do forced ranking or stacked ranking. We do, however, use ABC ranking. And in ABC ranking, you could have a team of all A players. You could have a team of A and B players. Finally, you can have a team of A, B, and C players. You rank them where they belong, not where they have to be based on the percentage of the population of your team. So how do we rank them? We rank them with 2 primary criteria. There are productivity. So how well does the employee do his or her job? And when we do this, it's important for the manager to be totally honest and give a fair ranking. You can't rank your direct reports based on some pie-in-the-sky notion that you think they should be doing something. You can only rank them on how well they're doing their job against the requirements and the job definition that you've tasked them to do. I know that sounds simplistic, but a lot of times we have in our mind what we want a person to be, but we may have not even told them that, let alone write it down in a job description. We do this with what we call the ESP, and that's what I'm going to talk about in the next episode, in the Employee Success Plan. So we're going to go over that in episode 29 of the IT Provider Network, but think of it as a job description on steroids. Measuring productivity is pretty easy. It's pretty objective. You should have metrics to support most of this measurement. Things like sales activities, first appointments attended, tickets closed, calls answered, bugs fixed, net admin visits, so on and so on. You can even obviously come up with admin tasks and metrics that you want to work on. Productivity is pretty easy, pretty objective. Rank them on a 1 to 5 scale or an ABC scale, whatever you like that makes it easy for you to get them into an eventual ABC ranking. The next thing we measure in our employee base is culture and fit. So how well does this employee fit into the company, department, and team that he's working on? Culture fit in our company is the measure of how well a team member will reflect our core beliefs, our attitudes, our behaviors, the things that make up our organization. So that's what we think of as culture fit. You should be looking at your core values, how well your team member works with his peers, how well he works with you, the direct manager. You should also look at normal things like dependability, reliability, promptness, neatness, and what I call the general give a shit attitude. Does the employee care about your customers? That's what's really important here. So rank him on a scale of 1 to 5 or A, B, and C on how well he does on cultural fit. After we do that, what we do is we get all of our executive managers together and we put them together in a room to review each employee's ABC analysis. We do this in private. It's a confidential meeting. And during this meeting, each manager presents his team members' rankings and the reasons and justification for the rank. If any of the other managers in the room have any direct experience with that employee, they're invited to offer an opinion and even try to sway the manager in his ranking. This is helpful to uncover some shortcomings that the manager might have, or perhaps even a personality conflict between the employee and the manager. It also tends to dig a little bit deeper into the surface issues that the manager presents in the meeting. After the ranking of the employee is presented, the team decides on an action plan for that employee. We have some guidelines for that as well, but each case is different. Before I talk about some of the actions, let me define the different players and the levels we're talking about here. So let's start at the bottom, the C players. We have a really simple test to determine whether an employee is a C player. The test is this: would you hire that employee again? If the answer is no, then most likely the employee is a C player. B players. B players we think of as the backbone of our company. They're the best employees. They truly care about our company. They truly care about our clients. They show up to work every day and they work their day every day. They rarely call out sick, and when they do, that's because they're sick. They're productive, usually well-liked within the company. They're doing everything they can just to do their job. Then we have the A players. I call them the superstars. If you read the book Who by Jeffrey Smart, he defines an A player as an employee who has at least a 90% chance of achieving the outcomes he sets out to do that only 10% of his peers could do. So he's got a 90% chance of getting it done where 10% of his peers couldn't do it. So that's an A player. A players have all the great characteristics of B players, but they're also talented and ambitious enough to be able to get promoted time and time again. A players are great, but in our industry, they don't often stay around long unless you pay a lot of attention to them, so be aware of that. Think about promoting A players to your management team or client-facing roles. If they have the right skills to do that, try to keep them happy and keep them on your team, because more A players is going to be more profit for you in the end. Now that we know who they are and what their classification looks like, what are we going to do with them? How are we going to make them better, move them up the ranks, or move them out the door? Let's start again with the C players. In our company, we have 3 possible action plans for C players, and only these 3. In our company, we have 3 possible action plans for C players, and only these 3. The first one is to move them. Place them in a different role in the company where they can be more successful and become a B or an A player. Sometimes this is a home run, but if I'm being totally honest, in my experience, this always ends up as a stopgap measure. If the employee will be moving to a new manager in our company, we need to make sure that the new manager fully signs on to coach and train this employee to B or A status. What we don't want to do is just toss people around that aren't the right people in our company instead of making the hard decisions. So option number 1, move them around. Option number 2, coach them. Sometimes a manager will believe that the C player is a C player because the manager failed them, or some circumstances occurred outside of the control that the employee has not been his best. Let's say they have a family member with a cancer or something like that. Not really the employee's fault. They have circumstances that are weighing down on them. That manager may choose to coach them. And that's fine too. Again, as long as we get a full buy-in. If that guy wants to keep him on for another year or another period, another couple months, he has to become fully committed to coaching and training that employee. The third case, and that's the hardest one, is always to invite them to be successful somewhere else. It's the least pleasant for everybody involved, but it's honestly the one that ends up happening the most with C players. We need to invite them to be successful in another company. This is especially true if the bulk of the problems with the employee reside on the culture and fit side of the measurement. You really can't change who people are. You can always increase their productivity, teach them new skills, but you can't really change who they are. So if the culture side is a big problem and they're a C player, chances are you're going to escort them out the door. It's really difficult for a person to do that. I understand that. It's difficult for me to do that. But in my experience, trying to change a person always results in them changing back to what they were before. So whatever action is decided on, it's always handled in such a way that the employee is not surprised about their performance. All along, you need to be communicating with your direct reports and tracking their success against their ESPs, their success plans. Or if you don't have success plans, track it against their job description. Meet with them every couple of weeks and make sure they're on track or they know they're off track. So let's talk about actions for B players and A players. B players are your most important asset. The key here is don't neglect them. Provide them with training plans, career ladders, and make sure you give them some recognition. Each one of them is going to want recognition in a different way. Just try to provide it to them. Even if you're a relatively flat organization, as we were for many, many years, find a way to help them grow within your company. If you have a B player you think you could move up to an A player, we call these B plus players. And this is the only exception, the only plus, if you will. The only plus is that they're really high on the culture fit scale, but maybe their productivity is not that of an A. That's really worth investing in. A B plus is really worth investing in because they have the right culture, they're the right fit in your company. You just need to push their productivity on a little bit. If we have them, we really work with them to try to move them up, strive to move them up to be A players. And the same thing goes for A players. If you're lucky to have some of them, make sure you're taking the time to nurture them, feed their ego, give them what they want. Remember, you don't need to win battles. You need to win wars. So try to take care of those A players. Most of them will have an ego. You're going to have to stroke it. Just suck it up and do it. And if you're light on A players, you don't have any, or maybe you only have a couple, then start working on your hiring process to only look for A players. Don't settle for Bs and Cs. As you're replacing those C players that you don't think you can turn around, build your bench with top-notch A players. This is the key. If you really want to grow your company, you need to strive for more and more A players. I'm not saying you need all A players because B players do the bulk of the work, but you need a team of A players as well. As I mentioned in some of the earlier podcasts, I did 3 episodes on hiring. I put links to them in the show notes along with a link to a 40-page hiring guide that I wrote. Pick them up. You should be able to get some good nuggets out of them that help you with the hiring process. So that's it for episode 28 of the IT Provider Network. As always, I thank you wholeheartedly for your comments and emails, the reviews you give me on iTunes, and I'd love to have some more of them. So if you have a minute, give me a review on iTunes or Stitcher. And as always, for the support that you've given me. If you see something posted about the podcast, please share it with your friends. It's because of that the word gets out and we can help our community grow. And lastly, I'd love to hear from you. I'm always looking for topics that you feel will be helpful to help you build, grow, and scale your business. So if you want to talk to me about that, drop me a line at terry@itprovidernetwork.com and we can have a discussion about it. But until then, make it a great day. And remember, we are IT.
Thank you for joining us, and we hope you've been inspired. Check Check us out on social media via @ITProviderNet and visit us at www.itprovidernetwork.com for past episodes, show notes, videos, and more. And we hope you'll join Terry next time on the IT Provider Network.